Okay. And if you guys can flip your cameras on, that'd be good. I want to thank everybody for joining the class this, what is it, this 9th week already. And what we'll do is we'll get into this chapter. This section is about relationships. And it's kind of an interesting progression from the last section, which, we talked about person, kind of identifying or at least understanding who you are as a person, and then how does that translate into the CMC world. And then next chapter was on presence and how do you establish a sense of presence, when interacting with others. And then the third chapter was on something called propinquity, which is closeness. Hold on. Which is closeness. And then now we're jumping into this chapter on social information processing. So kind of all similar. It's, I guess it always kind of draws the analogy to how you would process information in a face-to-face environment. But now we're kind of translating, going from face-to-face to, online. And how does the environment being online help to foster this development of relationships? So, it's always an exercise to think about how you develop a relationship on, any kind of face-to-face physical world, and then how does that actually kind of translate into the online world? So that's kind of the path that the chapter takes, and that's what we'll chat about this, on this week's lecture. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. And I put the PowerPoint in Laulima, and you can find it in the resources folder. So if you want to pull that up and follow along, you can do that as well. But I'll share screen and go through some of these slides here. Okay, so we're talking about social information processing and another kind of I don't know, maybe academic term, hyperpersonal relationships. So social information processing, and they abbreviate it SIP. So you might see SIP used here and there. So this is kind of like the relationship formation inside an online environment. And, I thought about this, and I think, most of me personally speaking, most of my relationships have all started in the face-to-face real world. And I'm trying to think of examples of relationships that might have been fostered purely online. And there have been some. I mean, and these are maybe more recent as a result of maybe the COVID pandemic, or maybe some of the work that I do, with some of the other states across the country. A lot of it is being done over Zoom. So any relationship would perhaps get started in an online environment. And then how does that relationship evolve over time? And I'll bring some examples up of that. And there's these sort of terms that are used called social penetration and uncertainty reduction. So social penetration. So that is basically, another way of saying, how do you build this relationship starting from not knowing the person to actually, getting to know the person. And I guess it's a term used in this book called social penetration. And then there's another phrase of this uncertainty reduction. And if you think about whenever you go into some environment and you don't know the people that are there, let's say you go to an event and you've gone pretty much by yourself, you don't really know who all the other people are. How do you start to reduce that level of uncertainty, as to who these folks are, and how do you want to kind of like take a stab at either getting to know them or building a relationship. At a minimum, you want to at least kind of like get to know who they are. And so how do you go about doing that? And that's the process of uncertainty reduction. Okay, so social penetration, this is a little bit more detail as to like what is it, what constitutes this social penetration. So, when you go into a environment, you look around, you sort of get a sense as to the demographic of the people that are there. They may be your age, they may be of different ages. That's all part of that demographic. Then you look at the sort of social preferences, right? You could look at the crowd and, are they white collar workers? Are they blue collar workers? Are they all students? What is the sort of the social makeup? You get into a little bit more, deeper understanding when you start to ask yourself or ask the question of, what are these folks, what are some of their goals and what are their aspirations? Obviously, you're not going to get that from everybody, but as you start to drill down after interacting or talking to somebody, you might learn a little bit more about their goals and aspirations. They may then perhaps confide in you some of their hopes and anxieties and beliefs. And, fifth is the personal self concepts. Now, these aren't going to all happen at the same, let's say, event or occurrence. This may happen over a course of time. Now, they may happen, at one meeting, but it's highly unlikely that, this is all going to happen at one interaction. So this is something that gotta keep in mind. We're talking about it in this lecture, but these kinds of activities, this idea of social penetration, really takes time, and the time window depends, right? It depends on how frequently you might meet, or what is the geographic span, what is the project you might be working on, what is the relationship that's potentially kind of developing. This all could be weeks, could be months, could be years. Okay, so you have this idea of social penetration, you have this self concept, and then you have, these are sort of these concentric circles, or how deep that social penetration wants to get between you and whoever you're building this relationship is. So this is another way of kind of depicting the level of sort of, I guess that you could say, intimacy, or how much you are getting to know somebody, how deep do you want to get. Interpersonal uncertainty reduction. So the idea that you have this process of social penetration, it's it's the act of, going deeper is kind of the uncertainty reduction. The further you delve into somebody's, personal aspirations, it's like a door that has been opened that you can either mutual understanding of walking through and getting to know that person. And that is the act of, developing a relationship. Now, this is all very sort of subjective because if, there's an interaction and there is no door that opens, there's no interest on the part of the person to share any additional information. Maybe the person is a very, very private person. They will show indications of, that door kind of closing. So that's a decision that you make to either, pursue it or move on. So the idea that, the uncertainty reduction is always going to get to that inner circle is not necessarily the case, with all the relationships that could potentially be fostered, in meeting people. So, if you're seeking information, anticipate future relationship, just want something from someone, find a person interested or threatening, these are all kind of like paths and doors that may or may not open. Okay. Otherwise, no motivation to reduce uncertainty. In other words, if it's going to go nowhere, then that's the nature of human relations. So the chapter kind of talks about the strategies for uncertainty reduction, and these are next couple slides get into a little bit more detail, as to what actually takes place during each one of these sort of strategies. So you got this passive, you sort of watch quietly. You have active, where you ask others about a person. There's interactive, engage in that conversation, and then extractive, look up information about the person. So these are some kind of more details as to what each of these strategies are and what would take place. So in this passive strategy, you might get invited to a, gathering, a meeting, or maybe a Zoom call, and you want to just kind of figure out like who's the players or who's the active participants in this gathering. And depending on who you feel, back in the chapter about person, you're like, who are you? Are you really outgoing and you want to kind of make a strong impression in any of these kinds of gatherings? That's going to decide whether you want to be a passive participant or not, right? So as a passive, and this could be a strategy that even if you're an extrovert, you could decide, I don't need to be, being so like in your face at the first meeting. So there's maybe a strategy just to kind of observe, right? Observe as persons interact and react to each other. So you kind of, make that sort of general, so like a fly on the wall kind of strategy. And then you can observe people interacting with people that and draw comparisons or similarities to friends. So, if you know somebody and you see somebody interacting with somebody else and you kind of, maybe know what their character is, you can sort of get a gauge as to how that other person that you're trying to assess, like who they actually are. And then the third one here is watch persons when less inhibited, less affected by social norms, identify candid behaviors. So, this could be like, if you go to a bar or something and you are, having a drink, you may not be, like actively interacting, but you might be sort of like watching. And as you watch, and as people, drink more alcohol, they become less inhibited. And I remember, this was, it's like a cultural thing, like in Japan. And at least the times that I've gone there on a business kind of trip, they'd always have, a meal and drinking at the end of the day. And I learned that it's kind of a combination of trying to find out something about you and finding something about you in an environment where you're less inhibited. And so it's kind of like a social, cultural kind of environment where you let your guard down, and then you kind of maybe see the true person come out. So I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen here. I've seen that happen in Japan as well. Okay, active uncertainty reduction strategy. So this active strategy, seek relevant information about the person. So, you want to make an assessment of somebody, maybe you see somebody, you want to better get to know. Instead of approaching the person, you might ask others about the person, and you get some information from somebody else that might know that person. So that's kind of like an active role, but you're not directly going to that person. You can select or change the environment, observe person in different unfamiliar surroundings. So, if you happen to, meet at a social event and you see a certain way somebody might interact versus in let's say a business environment, you can start to make an assessment as to that degree of relationship you are now kind of developing. Now, these are all, for the most part, I think, face-to-face kind of environment. So this is taking kind of the face-to-face and going through these, various kind of strategies. So interactive uncertainty reduction strategies. So you interact with the person, you seek personal information. So this is interactive. So you actually engage in a conversation. And this is the typical, I don't know, first time meeting, maybe first time going out on a date or something with the person. This is where you're actually interacting and you're asking direct questions, right? So there's a question and answer kind of interaction, this verbal, I don't know if interrogation is the right word, but it's a typical kind of conversation that might take place. And then you got this listen for self-disclosure of information that is new or not publicly known. And in a relationship, you might have this kind of conversation, and perhaps the person will share something that is of sort of personal. Maybe they'll share a hobby, or maybe they'll share something about a family situation. And if you are aware and present, right, you can pick up on so some of those cues, and then it's your choice whether you want to go down a path of further inquiry, right? So that may be a process of indicating something that the person has on their mind or is of interest to them, and you as the other person fostering this interactive relationship or strategy it's your choice to follow that path and express perhaps some interest in that particular topic. And then as you interact, more information is shared. There's a relationship that sort of starts to form, and then that's when you sort of start to go a little deeper into understanding, who that person is. And then another, this fourth one, watch for hedges, enhancements, distortions, evasive responses, omissions, falsification. So this is again, know who you are, know yourself, be, this very present. This is that whole idea of presence. And then can you sense any of this in the interaction? And when you talk about hedges or distortions or evasive responses, can you tell? So like if you're asking somebody, I heard you have a brother, or I heard you have a sister, and that starts to open the door for getting some personal information. And then the reaction might be, they might change the subject. They might not be interested in talking about their relations. Another one is like, you might be first time meeting somebody, and they might you might ask them, where do you live? And they might feel, that's kind of like too personal, right? So they might evade the question, or they might say something like, I think I might have asked a similar question. I think I mentioned to you all that I'm doing this thing called the Hawaii Annual Code Challenge, and then there was a person that was on a Zoom call, interested in in the project that we were pitching, and I knew who she was, but I don't remember where she worked. And then I asked the question, where are you at nowadays? And my question was really kind of geared toward, where are you working? But I didn't say, where are you working? I said, where are you at these days? And the answer was, I'm on Oahu. So I thought, okay, that's kind of an interesting answer. So that was a little bit of an evasive response. Then there's, omissions and falsifications. So these are just kind of, are you aware enough of those kinds of potential responsive and indications that, may perhaps be indications of, kind of like moving on to something else. Another example, that I think you might all be familiar with in Hawaii, at least, is that, when you first meet somebody, oftentimes the first thing they'll ask you is, what high school did you go to? And, the reason for that is, that is one of those assessments of the sort of like the social circles, depending on, what your answer is. So if the answer is, like a public school, that's, it's a public school. And if the answer is like Kamehameha, that's, that kind of indicates Native Hawaiian environment. If it's like Punahou, that's kind of like the whole private school thing. So there's a lot that could be derived from just the question, where did you go to high school? And that's why in Hawaii, that is oftentimes one of the first questions that gets asked, in kind of the getting to know you relationship phase. Okay, extractive uncertainty reduction strategy. So this extractive one is what we are all now pretty much, living in, being that it's all online. The internet is very accessible, and anything and everything that's been potentially put out there on social media is discoverable, via a Google search. In this case, you could read a newspaper account or look up information about a person. Oftentimes, a name might cross my desk, and I'm curious, like, oh, who is this person? I think I heard of this person somewhere. In fact, somebody asked me, who's the CIO of the Department of Education? And that's a pretty easy Google search. So you just do, Department of Education, Hawaii, Chief Information Officer. So you can search the person, and then name pops up. And then when the name pops up, all you do is drop the name in, and oftentimes I'll just put name and then Hawaii, and then you'll see what comes up on a Google search. And then search public records, library, internet. Nowadays, I don't know, Stacy might feel the library is still a place to go search for stuff, but the first place everybody's gonna first search is the internet. And there's other resources in the state for public records, but that's still a pretty manual process. Whether you're looking up a book or you're going in and doing a public record search, because the public record search tends to be fairly sort of physical. They got like this thing called microfiches that are basically images of old documents. Like if you wanted to look for like a marriage certificate, you could go to a public records, the state. It's kind of right next to the library. It's an archive, and you can look up public records. So there's places that you can look, but obviously the first place you're gonna look is the internet. So this is called extractive uncertainty reduction strategy. Now, let me just say that, if you're fostering a relationship and you're at the early stages of that relationship, and you want to learn more about the person, it's probably not something that you would immediately disclose that you are doing a Google search on that person, because that might automatically shut a door, right? So it's information that you might find useful to continue your fostering of a relationship, but it is still also sort of there's a strategic time and place to even bring up the fact that you might have done a Google search, on that person. Okay, so how do these uncertainty reduction strategies and relationship building really kind of translate into the CMC world? And this active, passive, interactive strategies online, oftentimes there are not too many these nonverbal cues. So nonverbal cues, we know of as the body language or the facial expressions. These are all kind of nonverbal cues. Face to face, you can sort of sometimes. I mean, some people are very astute, right? They might see a facial expression. When somebody is being evasive, they might have a facial expression that gives away that cue. That's a nonverbal cue. In the CMC world, you might not see some of those nonverbal cues. Many of these CMC platforms filter out those nonverbal cues, and the author of the book sort of makes references to some of the let's say text-based, or even touches on the dating apps, and how the dating apps are very selective in what it is that they put out there, right? So those are the filtering, the ability to filter out these nonverbal cues. But humans are motivated information seekers. So, CMC is not the only path. And as I just described, most of the relationships that you will foster are going to be a combination of all of these. Some of it might be social media, some of it might be, email, text-based, phone conversations, as well as face-to-face. So, this is kind of an overview of, how one face-to-face world sort of intersects with the CMC world. But it's a constantly changing and evolving environment. So these communicators, these information seekers, they're going to adopt strategies to the medium. And, I've mentioned some of the groups that I've worked through. One is obviously the Broadband Hui, which is an online weekly meeting of people across the state. But that's not the only way that I connect with them, right? So it's a one vehicle, but then I have other avenues to continue to foster the relationship. And that it could include email, it could include text, it could include phone conversations. Use available cues, substitute missing information. So, I guess maybe one example is that some of the folks that I've fostered relationships with over the years, on the Broadband Hui, have been people that I've really not interacted that much with face to face, right? So I have to continue to figure out ways that I can develop new ways of better understanding, who they are, and again, using those kind of techniques to further understand, who these people, individuals, organizations are. Verbal content replaces non-verbal information. I will say that I recently did something called the Digital Equity Innovation Awards, and since I'm teaching this class, it gives me additional sort of fodder and environments to kind of better understand, when talking about terms like social information processing, and then the idea of relationship building. You would think that somebody that gets nominated, in a Digital Equity Innovation Award program would feel compelled to, be on the interview video that is produced, featuring all the Innovation Award winners. So it's very, very interesting to see a couple things. And it's not so much the people that did show up, it's the people that didn't show up. And in one case, one of the mayors did not show up. So if you do watch the video, you can sort of look at, which mayor did not show up. And then if you look at some of the award winners, and the fact that all the award winners had an opportunity to be interviewed and say a few words, it's interesting to see who did not show up. So, that's just another example of, as you go down this timeline, to better understand, people and the relationship that comes out of that fostering is quite revealing when you start to do some of these programs and you see who does show up or doesn't show up. So again, Um, it's all a process, and there's no one way to do it. Each of these environments offer kind of new insights into the person and persons, and you can learn a lot. Learn a lot about yourself, learn a lot about others. Okay, alternative strategies. Assessing information in CMC can take more time. So, I mean, all the stuff we're talking about is going to take time. But if you, I guess, take just purely, kind of the environment that you might be relying on. I don't know. Maybe it's Facebook. Maybe it's Instagram. Maybe it's Zoom, right? And then you only use that particular tool to get better understanding of the person. These techniques, right, may take longer to do if you're just going to do it over CMC. If you have other tools available, and as I described, it could be as involved as running a innovation award program, and that took a lot of different moving parts, and it could tell you a lot in that period of time. But if you're only relying on one tool, it could definitely take more time. Relationship formation, the processes the same as face-to-face. So whether you're relying on your ability to foster a relationship over the CMCs, you still have to do the same thing over face-to-face, but it still takes different amount of time, different techniques to use, different different sort of information processing indicators, but it's still, the process is still the same. You have to still kind of figure it out, right? Some of the substitute verbal expressions when talking about these non-verbal cues, if you don't get the verbal expression, some of the substitutes would be an emoji. And that's why, in the beginning of the class, I asked everybody to put a sort of substitute verbal expression. In fact, it was a substitute text expression of how you felt your day was going, and just use an emoji. And that was kind of a neat little exercise. But it does tell you a lot, and I think it says a lot when somebody might be responding to you via an email or a text, and they either end it with a LOL, or they start off with a kind of like a ha ha laugh kind of kind of abbreviation. I mean, and that's definitely kind of an indicator of the sort of the mood of that piece of communications. Use interactive questioning. That's again just the ability to ask the right questions, get the right responses, see if the door continues to open. Yeah. Access text-based language cues. And again, those are the before the emojis, there were some of those text-based cues. It could be using the semicolon dash apostrophe, for a smiley face, or it could be just those abbreviations, like I mentioned, LOL. So those are some of the alternative strategies to getting to know somebody. So again, social information in the CMC environment, it does take more time. That's the slow start, and again, none of this happens overnight. It's a slow kind of build, in terms of that relationship. And I mentioned earlier, you know, most of my relationships have all sort of pretty much started in a physical face-to-face world. But nowadays, because of Zoom and some of the work that we do across the country, there's some people that I haven't ever met, you know, in person. It's all basically online. But recently, you know, there have been convenings of colleagues, you know, that are in the similar work, and we get to meet someplace together. Like we just did our thing in Portland, and then I think you guys all remember I did the lecture from Portland, and there were people there that I wanted to kind of foster a relationship with. So I really made it a point to go up to them, talk story a little bit, even take a picture. I even took a picture with some of them just so that I could I told them, you know, I want to make sure I remember who you are, and taking a picture is going to help me remember that, because, you know, you go to these conferences and you not only get a lot of information all at once, but you meet all these people, and, you know, you'd be surprised how many people you might meet and how quickly you might forget who they are. I often go to these things and somebody might, you know, yell out my name, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, I wonder who is that person. So anyway, I did make it a point in the face-to-face to take a picture. And in the act of just taking a picture, you know, I needed to communicate the fact that I'm going to take a picture, and then communicate the fact that I wanted to make sure I remember who they are. And in the process of doing that, you know, I kind of at least take note of the name, the state that they're working from, and some additional information that, you know, will help me kind of remember who these folks are. So again, it's all kind of a combination of all the different tools that you have, you know, at your disposal. CMC, social information gathering, start slowly, accumulate to form relationships over time. Now this next graph kind of indicates, you know, exactly what they just said. So if you're using CMC and that's primarily your vehicle, and as I mentioned, you know, I might interact with some folks, and chances are I'm not going to really remember them. And even if I saw them at a conference, you know, I take the next step and take a picture, or, you know, write down their name, and, you know, and I sometimes also bring something from Hawaii and give it to them, so that, you know, they have something to remember. Yeah. But if it's purely on a CMC kind of level, the getting to know you is sort of like a straight line curve, or straight line, and it's not a rapid increase, where if it's a face-to-face, and, you know, in that face-to-face you're able to do more things like discussions and, you know, gift trading or whatever, you know, sharing a gift, or taking a picture. The impressions, and that's the y-axis, you know, goes up quicker. So the face-to-face actually goes up quicker in a shorter amount of time, and that's what this curve basically reveals. That, you know, the face-to-face will more quickly create sort of this environment for a relationship to take place quicker than purely on a CMC level. Okay, so this other section of the chapter talks about these hyper personal relationships, and this is where, you know, I mentioned earlier the idea of a dating app. And I'll be first to admit I have never used a dating app, so, you know, I'm kind of depending on the author's maybe research on the results. Now, I bring up dating apps, but they also make reference to, hyper personal, even in a kind of a working environment. So it's not just a dating kind of environment. And the idea of intimacy, it doesn't have to be a romantic intimacy. It just, how close you can become with somebody, whether it's on a personal level or on a business level. So that's what this hyper personal relationship is. And then people seeking to be liked, approved by others. There's always, in any kind of environment that you find yourself, whether you're in a class or, in a work environment, or, if you're in a social environment, right? People seek being liked. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily, the opposite of that is, you wouldn't be going out if you didn't want to be liked, right? If you just want to stay home and be by yourself, I mean, that's probably more suitable if you're not actually going out there to be social. Strategic self-presentation to gain approval. So this is kind of the example is like Instagram. So I figure a lot of you are on Instagram, and the Instagram environment is pretty curated by yourself, right? And you want to present what you feel is a highlight of whatever you're putting out on Instagram. So there's a tendency for posts that are on Instagram to be very strategic in a sense of presenting your best, sort of like your best face forward, right? So there is a skewed maybe impression of the person through purely the Instagram timeline or the Instagram feed. But hey, that's the nature of some of these CMC environments. So this idea of presenting the best face, others interpret this to feel relational closeness, and you'll see this in your feed. I mean, you might start getting people that are liking your feed. I often get that, and I'm wondering, who are these people? So anyway, that's kind of like what is it that you're presenting that draws people to this act of liking, and is it in fact, it's probably not even a genuine kind of thing. It's probably more, I don't know, I'm a little skeptic, right? So it could be a precursor to a scam, who knows, right? Lack of contradictory information expedites process. So, presenting yourself in one light will kind of give people a certain indication, and they will make some, determinations of that relationship. Any contradictory information is going to create some sort of, barrier, some kind of discontinuity, because people will now start to think, gee, is this person for real or what, right? So the lack of that contradictory information continues to expedite the idea of relational closeness. And then idealized interpretations facilitate reciprocal intimacy. So again, it's one thing to present yourself in a certain way. It will draw upon yourself a certain kind of reciprocal relationship, and does that end with a result in a relationship that's reciprocal in terms of intimacy. Now the thing about these dating apps that were talked about in the chapter kind of indicated that it only presented highly positive, kind of almost to the degree where it's maybe a exaggerated positivity, right? That created an environment for a reciprocal closeness. So somebody might take, that profile and really like that profile and start to pursue a relationship, via the dating app, and perhaps kind of want to take it to the next level of, meeting the person face to face. And I think the study that they referenced was that, out of the, I forget the exact numbers, but let me see if I can find it. The actual numbers of people that resulted in a kind of positive interaction after the face-to-face, which started off as an interaction on a dating app, was pretty low. So it was definitely conclusive that just because you might have met on a dating app, and then consequently moving to a face-to-face did not result in a continuation, of that relationship. So that was kind of an interesting conclusion. So these hyperpersonal relationships, again, how quickly can you get to the core of the person, the self-concept of the person, the idea of the uncertainty reduction and getting to the core. Some of these, like a dating app as an example, you might think you're getting to the core, but then when you meet face to face, it doesn't really pan out, so that it continues on, in a more real face to face relationship environment. So hyperpersonal relationship cycle, you got reciprocal processes between people. You got the CMC feedback facilitates the process. This mutual attraction, this enhanced messaging, which is kind of like only presenting the very positive, ideal messaging, reciprocate with affirmation, encourages response with positive comment, the spiral of positive messages favorably interpreted. Okay, so that kind of like may happen on the CMC, but then, then you take it to the next level in the face-to-face, right? And so these are some of the, this cycle, right? This cycle of strategically editing, positively skewed, optimized self-presentation. You get the idealized perception of the communicator and relationship. That sort of characterizes this hyper-personal relationship. And then constructing authentic relationships, hyperpersonal misrepresentation, deception, concern. The prime example, dating apps, CMC self-presentation often connected to real life, long-term relationships less hyperpersonal. Meet face-to-face, dishonesty becomes obvious. And then applying hyperpersonal customer relations. This is taking it, out of the dating world and into the business world. 3 stages of this hyperpersonal customer relations: credibility, trust, liking, favorable impression. The language, immediacy, involvement, the response, and then this is all happening at a business level, right? And then expectation of future interactions. And in a business environment, future interactions is more on a business to business sort of transactional level, not personal intimacy. Applying hyperpersonal online presentations, positive profiles, photos, bio statements, undesirable aspects are deleted. You meet face to face, positive, negative experiences face to face. 2, fulfilled expectations, positive outcomes. 4, violated expectations. 3, negative outcomes. 1, surprise. So this is, I think, a result of some of the studies that they conducted. Catfishing. Catfishing is really a term used when somebody is impersonating someone. And again, this is the dark side of the web, right? Trying to ferret through, are some of these misrepresentations, can you determine that quickly so that you can just kind of move on, because you don't want to get caught up in a kind of a catfishing scheme. This speed dating, the conclusion in this, text-based video conference speed dating, in a text-based environment, there was more social interaction, more persistent attraction. But when compared to, going from a text-based to a video conference, it stalled, I guess, with a video conference. There was more interaction via text and less via video conference. And I think that seems pretty obvious, because in a video conference, you can sort of see each other, and so you're probably being a little bit more cautious and a little bit more held accountable, in a video conference environment. So, analysis of social information processing and hyperpersonal. The social interaction information processing, not always a closer relationship. Hyperpersonal, lack of nonverbal, quickens the intensity, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's a lasting thing. Hyperpersonal does not show how personal traits, message, feedback affect relationship formation. The idea of social information processing, asynchronous text-based CMC, slows information of relationships. But again, all of this stuff that we just covered are tools that will, aid in the development of any relationship, but it's all interacting, with each other. So it's not like one answer fits all. All of this is going to interact with your ability to cultivate that relationship in real life, face to face. You can help maintain it through the tools. These are some suggestions as to how, those interactions could be maintained to then foster a relationship. But I like this chapter just because, it sort of breaks down what it is that takes place in fostering these relationships. But the key to remember is that, these all take place over time, and it's really up to you how you kind of strategically use the tools at the right time, and how you continue to, foster the relationship that you build with the people in your respective circles. So whether that's family or friends or business or, at school. So anyway, that's the chapter, and thanks for your attention. Any questions? Okay. So again, I will make the quizzes available right after this. Again, just do the true, false, and the multiple choice, and then I'll see you back here on Thursday with another guest speaker, and should be interesting. It's also like Nathan from last week, kind of coming from the PR, public relations standpoint. So if you don't have any questions, I will end here, and I'll see you all on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank